Today I'm making the perfect buttermilk biscuits. I preheated my oven to 425 degrees Fahrenheit and I arranged my baking shelf to the center, and I got out a 9-inch round cake pan. That's what we'll bake the biscuits in today. So let's start with our dry ingredients. I have self-rising flour. If you don't have self-rising flour, you can use all-purpose, and for every cup you mix in a half teaspoon of salt and 1.5 teaspoons of baking powder. So for all my dry ingredients, I have 2 cups of self-rising flour, and that's 9 ounces or 255 grams. To that, I'm going to add 1.5 teaspoons of salt, 3 tablespoons of white sugar, and I'm just going to mix it up. And after I get that incorporated, you take your shortening, a 1/4 cup of shortening, and work it into your dry ingredient. You can use a knife or your hands or one of those biscuit cutting devices. I just like using my hands. It doesn't have to be fully incorporated. Just make sure that you don't have lumps bigger than the size of a pea. You don't want big lumps of shortening in your biscuits. But you don't have to spend too much time doing this. So just a side note about when you measure flour, you don't have to sift it, but you do want to get an accurate measurement. So instead of sifting it and measuring it, take a separate spoon or measuring cup and pour it into your measuring cup that you're measuring the flour with, and don't pack it down. And that's how you get a good measurement. Because if you just go scoop your flour out, you're going to get more than that 255 grams per 2 cups of flour. It'll be heavier because it'll be packed. And if you sift it, it might be too light. So that's mixed up well enough. For my liquid ingredients, I have 1 cup of buttermilk, and I have 2/3 of a cup of heavy cream. And I just mixed them together right here in this container here. So you see 1 2/3 cup line there. And you just pour it in. Get my spatula. So there's such a thing as overworking biscuit dough, and there's also such a thing as underworking biscuit dough. You want to mix this up until it becomes the consistency of a lumpy cottage cheese, like a wet cottage cheese. See, we're almost getting there. It's probably about, 15 stirs, 20 stirs? At about 10 right now. More. I didn't scrape the bottom. So that's it right there. That's when you want to stop. You still see lumps in there, but it's mixed well enough where you scrape through to the bottom, you don't see any dry flour in there. That's all you want. You don't have to mix it anymore. And it looks like it would be too wet, but that's a good thing because you don't want to roll this. You're not going to cut this with a biscuit cutter. These are drop biscuits. So in a separate bowl, you get all-purpose flour. The reason you use all-purpose flour when you drop your biscuits in this is because if you drop your biscuits in self-rising flour, the extra salt and the extra cornstarch and the baking powder, the leveling ingredient, the rising ingredient will burn and char on the outside and it turns bitter. That's why you want all-purpose flour. It doesn't have those leavening or self-rising ingredients. So what I like to do, you can measure it out with about a number 30 ice cream scoop, I believe it is. Or you can just grab a 1/3 cup. I got a 1/3 of a cup right here. And I found that if I do about 7 or 8 of these, it'll completely cover my pan right here. So let's go with 1 cup of this guy. It doesn't have to be exact. That's what I'm doing right there. You just take it and you just drop it in your flour. And there it is right there. And you just gently roll her over so it's completely tossed in the flour, and just gently roll it through your hands just like that. I know I'm making a mess right now, but I gotta show you how to get the flour dusted off. It's gonna look just like that, about 1/3 of a cup. You throw it in your pan. You don't have to grease your pan, you don't have to do anything to your pan because you have plenty of flour on the outside of it. And now we just continue. These are obviously not vegan or keto or paleo, but I have converted this recipe to make a vegan recipe, and it's really good. And if this goes pretty well, I'll make the video for that guy. Now, like I said, you're going to make a mess. Probably not as messy as me. But these biscuits need to crowd up against each other in the pan. They need to be touching each other. They're neighbors, friends, family biscuits. You know, a lot of people would say one flour is better than the other. Some people would say that, you know, baking flour or you know, whatever, Swan's Down flour, there's several different brands. I like the lowest protein flour that you can find. Lowest protein flour that I could find was White Lily. I don't know where you guys are from, but I've only seen White Lily down in the southeast. So if you live around the northwest, you probably won't find White Lily flour. But just look for a flour that says that it's low protein. Looks like we're going to be able to make one more, and we'll make 7 today. So So like I said, if you could use an ice cream scoop or a smaller measuring cup, you could make more biscuits, make them smaller, you can make them bigger, whatever you like, but I find that a third of a cup rounded off gives me about 7 to 8 every time. And it looks like one of these guys are going to be a little bit smaller than the other, but you know what, that's okay. It's going to look like that. Just take your pan and drop it so they're flattened out a little bit. And they got wrinkly cracks and they look ugly on the outside, but they'll bake up just fine. So my oven is preheated at 425. I'm going to throw these in for about 20 or 25 minutes. You know, time really doesn't matter. Sometimes your oven might cook hotter or cooler. Just wait until it's light brown. And then after it comes out of the oven, just brush the tops with butter and invert it onto a plate, and then re-invert it onto another plate, and they're ready to eat. So I'm gonna clean up my mess real quick with you guys and tell you about a slightly different variation of this recipe. And that's if you want sweet biscuits or savory biscuits. So the recipe that I just showed you, that recipe is for a savory biscuit. Even though it's a savory biscuit, you can still add your butter and jam or peanut butter, honey, maple syrup, whatever you like on your biscuits. So I'd say the savory biscuit is more versatile. You can put more things on top of it. But the variation to the recipe, the sweeter biscuit, rather than using the 1.5 teaspoons of salt and the 3 tablespoons of white sugar, you would use about 1/4 of a cup of sugar and only 1/2 of a teaspoon of salt. Now, if you were making sweeter biscuits, they would hold up to their own without having to add any additional syrups, jams, or jellies. And you can even put raspberries, blueberries, blackberries, or whatever you want, chocolate chips, pecans, inside of your biscuits, because it's a sweet biscuit. It kind of reminds me of a scone when you do that. But that's the variation for the sweeter biscuit. And if you wanted to take a peek at my recipe, that's it right there. Alright, thanks guys. Alright, I have my melted butter in a little cup, my basting brush. I got a board to put the hot pan on, and I got my 2 plates right here to invert them. The timer just went off. I'm going to give the biscuits an extra 30 seconds because they're not quite the brownness that I like. And I'm going to go pull them out of the oven, which is right now. And there they are. So I'm just going to take my towel here lay it over the top, grab a plate, invert them all, let them sit there, tap it with my brush. Sounds like it's loose. Hot pan. And that's what the bottom looks like. See, it didn't stick at all. No residue on the pan either. I'm gonna take my plate again, invert it one more time, pull this guy off, take my butter on my brush, and wash it over there. I used about a tablespoon of melted butter. You can use salted or unsalted, it doesn't matter. I prefer salted, but if you're watching your sodium intake, just use unsalted. And same for the recipe, you can lessen the salt if you want, if you don't like it that salty. That's it. They're ready to eat. And you just take these guys and you'll just pull them apart. I'll take this little one right here and show you. Oh, might need a knife, might not. These are still really hot, they're steamy out of the oven, but you can see how nice and fluffy they are.